Walter Jimenez had been driving a school bus in San Antonio for over 10 years. He'd seen it all: kids throwing up, fighting, crying over lost homework, even one who once tossed a shoe out the window mid-turn. But he had never seen a child cry so precisely, so quietly, and so consistently as Lucía Morales. Every morning, as she climbed aboard and sat in the fourth row by the window, the 11-year-old would begin to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a silent stream of tears, eyes fixed downward, always during the first 2 minutes after the bus pulled away from the corner of Old Valley Road where her stepfather stood waving goodbye. Then silence for the rest of the ride. Walter didn't understand it, and he had no reason to interfere. But then, one Wednesday morning, he noticed Lucía bend down and slip something beneath her seat. When the other students had gotten off, he walked back, leaned down, and picked up the small, cloudy white object, a pill, oval-shaped, stamped with the code M22. He didn't know what it was until a quick search on his phone made his chest tighten. It was levonorgestrel, emergency contraception, a pill most often used after someone is forced. Walter looked at the empty seat where Lucía had just been. The bus was quiet. A breeze slipped through a window that hadn't closed all the way, and in the rearview mirror, his own face looked frozen, like a photograph he didn't remember taking. For the first time in over a decade behind the wheel, he realized there was a child who didn't just need a ride to school. She needed saving. Walter started paying closer attention after that day, not just to the fact that Lucía cried, but to how she cried. Quiet, controlled, no hands wiping at her face, no tissues, as if she had learned how to let tears fall without making a sound. Every morning at exactly 6:43 a.m., he pulled the bus up to the stop on Old Valley Road, where Rafael Salinas, Lucía's stepfather, stood waiting. He was always dressed neatly. Collared shirt, dark sunglasses, hair slicked back with gel, one hand holding a briefcase, the other resting gently on Lucía's shoulder like he was seeing his daughter off to summer camp. Lucía never looked at him, never said goodbye. She just climbed aboard, nodded politely to Walter, sat in her usual seat, and cried. Walter began taking notes, handwritten, kept in a small spiral pad tucked beside the gear shift. Date, time, Lucía's behavior, Rafael's posture. He marked red dots on mornings when she seemed more withdrawn. He scratched a line across days she took something from her pocket and stuffed it quickly into her bag. One morning, Walter deliberately slowed the bus a few seconds and watched in the mirror as Rafael leaned in closer than usual, barely a few inches. But Lucía blinked, fast, too fast, a reflex he had seen before, not in kids, in soldiers, when something dangerous stood too close. Walter had no hard evidence, but he'd been a soldier once, and instinct, once sharpened by war, doesn't dull with time. Something was wrong, something heavy, and he seemed to be the only one still noticing it. 3 weeks after the morning he found the pill, Walter watched Lucía pull out a folded note as she stepped on board. She read it quickly, then crushed it and shoved it between the seat cushions. After the students had left, Walter returned and pulled it out. Handwritten, blue ink, shaky penmanship. The first line read, "Good daughters don't talk about what happens in dreams." Below it, 5 shorter lines, choppy, incomplete, some crossed out as if copied from somewhere. If they ask, say it's a private lesson. Never tell your teacher. What others call wrong might not be a crime. Walter sat in the driver's seat with the note still in his hand. Outside, the sky was bright, but inside his chest, something turned cold. And then the thought came, louder than the engine warming up. This wasn't just crying, this was a plea for help, written in silence. Walter started paying closer attention after that day, not just to the fact that Lucía cried, but to how she cried. Quiet, controlled, no hands wiping at her face, no tissues, as if she had learned how to let tears fall without making a sound. Every morning at exactly 6:43 a.m., he pulled the bus up to the stop on Old Valley Road, where Rafael Salinas, Lucia's stepfather, stood waiting. He was always dressed neatly, collared shirt, dark sunglasses, hair slicked back with gel, one hand holding a briefcase, the other resting gently on Lucia's shoulder like he was seeing his daughter off to summer camp. Lucia never looked at him, never said goodbye. She just climbed aboard, nodded politely to Walter, sat in her usual seat, and cried. Walter began taking notes, handwritten, kept in a small spiral pad tucked beside the gear shift. Date, time, Lucia's behavior, Raphael's posture. He marked red dots on mornings when she seemed more withdrawn. He scratched a line across days she took something from her pocket and stuffed it quickly into her bag. One morning, Walter deliberately slowed the bus a few seconds and watched in the mirror as Raphael leaned in closer than usual, barely a few inches. But Lucia blinked, fast, too fast. A reflex he had seen before, not in kids, in soldiers, when something dangerous stood too close. Walter had no hard evidence, but he'd been a soldier once, and instinct, once sharpened by war, doesn't dull with time. Something was wrong, something heavy, and he seemed to be the only one still noticing it. 3 weeks after the morning he found the pill, Walter watched Lucia pull out a folded note as she stepped on board. She read it quickly, then crushed it and shoved it between the seat cushions. After the students had left, Walter returned and pulled it out. Handwritten, blue ink, shaky penmanship. The first line read, "Good daughters don't talk about what happens in dreams." Below it, 5 shorter lines, choppy, incomplete, some crossed out, as if copied from somewhere. If they ask, say it's a private lesson. Never tell your teacher. What others call wrong might not be a crime. Walter sat in the driver's seat with the note still in his hand. Outside, the sky was bright, but inside his chest, something turned cold. And then the thought came, louder than the engine warming up. This wasn't just crying. This was a plea for help, written in silence. Walter didn't go straight to the police. He had been a soldier, and once made the mistake of reporting to the wrong person, nearly costing him his life. To him, if you're going to sound the alarm, you'd better know where to strike and when. So, the next morning, after dropping the kids off, he stopped by the front office at Bel Air Elementary. He met Lucia's homeroom teacher, Caitlin Price, a young, enthusiastic teacher who often chatted with students outside of class. Walter was direct. "The girl cries every morning. I found an emergency contraceptive pill under her seat, and yesterday she hid a strange handwritten note." He handed her a copy. Caitlin read it, her face froze briefly, but then she folded it up, forced a small smile, and replied, "I'll forward this to the counseling team. Maybe she read it in a book or saw something online." Walter looked at her without saying anything. She didn't ask another question, and she didn't keep the note. The next day, Walter returned. The teacher was in internal meetings. 3 days later, he tried the assistant principal. After listening, the man sighed and said, "We can't take action based on feelings. If there's an issue, the parent has to be the one to report it." Walter asked, "What if the parent is the problem?" No one answered. A week passed, no one called back, no one followed up. Every morning, Lucia still got on the bus, still sat in the same seat, still cried, and still stayed silent. Walter began recording, with a phone mounted behind the rearview mirror. Each time, Lucia held a note. Each time, Raphael stood too close. Each glance in the mirror. He filmed it all. At first, just to have a record. But as the days passed, he became sure no one in the system wanted to look. Not because they didn't know, but because if they knew, they'd be expected to act. And maybe what made Walter angriest wasn't the silence. It was how everyone pretended to be politely surprised. Like this was just an inconvenience, not something worth interrupting a workday for. Walter wasn't waiting on the school anymore. He decided to follow. Not like a detective, but quietly, deliberately, like a father trying to find out where his child was being hidden. On Thursday morning, after Lucia stepped off the bus at school, Walter drove slowly, looping around and parking a few blocks away. He knew Rafael Salinas usually picked Lucía up each afternoon in a silver sedan. What he wanted to know now was, after school, where did they go? That afternoon, at exactly 3:18 p.m., Walter saw Lucía leave the school and get into Rafael's car. No backpack, no waving to friends. The sedan rolled west, turned off the main road, passed 2 intersections, then made an unexpected right onto a dirt lane. No signage, no markers. Walter kept his distance, heart pounding, but didn't stop. The path led to an old park. Empty, no signs, just a few rusted lampposts and a warehouse-like building partially hidden by trees. Rafael parked along the edge. He stepped out, opened Lucía's door. She followed without a word. They disappeared behind a metal door. Walter stopped his car 50 meters away, killed the engine, sat still. 15 minutes passed. No one came out, no noise, no traffic. Then, a gray SUV pulled up behind the sedan. A man stepped out. White shirt, cropped hair, dark glasses, empty-handed. He walked straight into the building. Then another car, another man. Walter looked at the dashboard clock. 4:02 p.m. When the fourth person arrived, this time a young man with a backpack, Walter grabbed his phone. His hands trembled. Not from fear. From knowing what he was seeing, a place with no name, not listed on any map, but a place a child was being led into like it was part of her daily routine. He hovered over the emergency call button, but didn't press it. He looked into the mirror, looked back at the building, and made a decision. Not yet, not now. He had to return, tomorrow, at the exact same time. Friday afternoon, 2:47 p.m. Walter had turned off his GPS, set his phone to airplane mode, and mounted a dash cam just behind the rearview mirror. Lens focused, recording. He knew today wasn't the day to shake. No mistakes, no second chances. At 3:19 p.m., Rafael showed up again, precise as a programmed clock. Lucía got in. Still no bag, still no words. Walter followed closer this time. He didn't overtake, didn't turn off. He had memorized every bump on the dirt road, every bush that blocked the line of sight, every sharp corner where sunlight flared against the windshield. When Rafael's sedan came to a stop, Walter parked at a discreet angle across the lot. From there, the dash cam caught everything. Lucía stepped out, white shirt, jeans, hair pulled tight. Rafael held her hand for a moment. He leaned in and whispered something close to her ear. She nodded. They walked in. The metal door clanged shut. 4 minutes later, the gray SUV returned. Same man. White shirt, dark glasses. Then 2 more arrived. Different cars, same routine. None of them carried anything. None hesitated. All walked inside as if they had done it 100 times. No glances, no questions. The camera got it all. Walter didn't know exactly what happened behind those walls, but he knew one thing. If a child walked into that place every day and cried every morning after, then you didn't need more evidence. You just needed someone to believe her. By 6 p.m., Walter had plugged the memory card into his laptop. The video clip was 43 seconds long. No zoom, no edits, no voiceover. But every frame was an accusation. A pickup, a bowed head, a man leaning in, a door that shut. Walter didn't send it to the school, didn't contact a counselor. He printed 3 stills from the footage, time-stamped each, labeled the location, wrote down the license plates. And at 7:30 p.m. that same evening, he walked into the San Antonio police station, placed the folder on the desk, and said, "I'm a school bus driver, and this is what I've seen over the past 2 days." On Monday morning, the San Antonio Police Department assigned 2 detectives from the Child Protection Unit to quietly inspect the warehouse. No sirens, no uniforms. They wore plain clothes. Unmarked vehicle. At exactly 3:06 p.m., they parked across the street, the same spot Walter had watched from. 4 minutes later, the silver sedan arrived. Rafael stepped out, opened the door for Lucía. She wore a long skirt, a white jacket, her hair tied low. Still no bag. Still no words. still looking down. Raphael took out a key, unlocked the warehouse door. They stepped inside. 12 seconds later, the two men from the opposite side approached. One gently pushed the door open. The other held out a badge. No resistance, no yelling, no greeting. Inside, no tables, no bed. Just a bare concrete room, walls painted a fading beige, patches of mold near the ceiling. A small camera mounted in the upper left corner. On the floor, a single worn mattress. Beside it, a locked plastic bin. Inside, girls' clothing, tissues, condoms, and a jar of Vaseline. Lucía stood in the corner, clutching the hem of her skirt, eyes on the ground. Raphael said nothing. Didn't run, didn't ask why. When the cuffs went on, he said only one thing. "I didn't force her, she came willingly." No one responded. Lucía was taken out through the side entrance. A female social worker placed an arm around her shoulders, shielding her from the sun with her jacket. The girl didn't cry, didn't ask questions. She just held the woman's hand tight, all the way to the car. The first attempt at an interview was not recorded, not because of a mistake, but because the lead detective requested to pause the recorder. "Write out your Lucía first sentence. I don't know what day it is today." Lucía was transferred to the Guadalupe Children's Emergency Shelter, a specialized facility in East San Antonio that accepts victims who are not yet able to speak about their trauma. She was placed in a quiet, soft gray room with no cameras, no one-way mirrors, just a bed, a drawing table, and a stack of blank paper. On the first day, she didn't eat, didn't speak. On the second day, she still didn't respond to any questions. But on the evening of the third, she asked for a box of colored pencils. A nurse placed the tray beside her. Lucía only picked two colors, gray and blue. On the first page, she drew a room. No windows. 4 bare walls. A mattress in the middle. No people. No sound. Second page, 3 men. No faces. One was a tall rectangle, one a circle, one a triangle. Each shape had a single letter beside it, J, L, R. Third page, she drew herself, small, in the corner of the room. Next to her was a speech bubble, but it was empty. Just a dotted line trailing off and stopping. Psychologist Maria Aranda was the first to approach her. She didn't ask, "What happened?" She simply said, "Can you teach me how to read this drawing?" Lucía shook her head, then nodded, then began to cry, for the first time since she was pulled from the warehouse. Over the next 7 days, Lucía drew 26 pictures. All of them had one thing in common. There was never any sound. No speakers, no footsteps, no words. Only blurry lines, pencil strokes gone shaky from being traced over too many times. In the final drawing, she didn't sketch a room. She drew a fork in the road. On the left, a shadowed figure reaching out its hand. On the right, a school bus stop sign. She stood in the middle. Not stepping, not choosing. At the bottom of the page, Lucía wrote a single line. Small, faded, but the first written word since her rescue. "How do you know who's really there to pick you up?" 4 days after Lucía began drawing, her biological mother, Lucía Morales, was contacted and brought to the center. She lived in Seguin, about an hour outside of San Antonio, working as a cashier at a small supermarket. When she entered the interview room, Mariela wore a green work uniform, faded canvas shoes, and a loose ponytail. Her head stayed down. Hands clenched her bag. Her eyes never lifted to meet anyone else's. A social worker started gently. "Lucía is safe, but we need to talk to you." Mariela nodded. She didn't ask where her daughter was, didn't ask what had happened. She just repeated, I didn't know." The interview was conducted in a private recorded room. When asked when Rafael Salinas had moved in, Mariela said, "About 2 years after I divorced Lucía's father. Rafael was originally a friend of my brother's." When asked whether she had noticed any signs that Rafael was controlling Lucía, Mariela paused, then said, "I worked a lot of overtime. By the time I got home, she was already asleep." An investigator asked directly, "Did you ever suspect Raphael was mistreating your daughter?" Mariella didn't answer right away. She pressed her lips together, then finally said, "I thought maybe she was just cold toward him. I figured maybe she still missed her real dad." She said nothing more. She didn't cry. She only asked to see her daughter. Lucía said no. That evening, in a closed internal meeting, the psychologist, investigators, and legal counsel at the Children's Protective Center agreed. No adult, including the mother, is to be reintroduced to Lucía unless she requests it herself. The next day, Mariella handed over a handwritten note. "I'm sorry I didn't see, but I'm here if you need me." The paper was folded and sealed in an envelope. It was delivered to Lucía's room. She didn't open it. She didn't return it. She slid it between two of her drawings, one of the empty room and one of the fork in the road. The next morning, she asked for a black pencil. Lucía began drawing what she called the dream without sound. In every image, no one's mouth was open, no words were written, and not a single sound symbol appeared. But each sketch carried a fragment of memory, blurry sometimes, out of proportion, but eerily consistent. The first drawing showed Raphael standing in the middle of a room, holding a belt. On the wall behind him were 3 red circles, later confirmed by police to be peeled paint spots in the exact position Lucía had drawn. The second sketch showed Lucía sitting on a mattress, legs folded, eyes wide open. No clock on the wall, something the investigators later recalled. The warehouse had no time-telling devices of any kind. The third, a hand wearing a thick silver ring, pressed against her shoulder, drawn harshly, almost as if etched into the page. Below it, Lucía had written, "This man isn't Raphael." Police began cross-referencing everyone who had ever been near the warehouse. Every license plate caught on Walter's footage. 3 men were identified, all from different counties, none with criminal records. But one, the owner of the gray SUV, had a wife working at the city attorney's office. On his old Facebook profile, a blurry wedding photo from 2009 showed his right hand, a thick silver ring. Lucía didn't know this man's name. She had never seen his picture, but in her 4th drawing she sketched a small logo on his shirt sleeve, 3 interlocking squares. Police didn't recognize it, but Walter did. It was the outdated emblem of the elevator maintenance company Raphael used to work for. The old uniform design, only a few kept theirs. An investigator wrote in the report, "There is no way Lucía could have known that logo unless she had seen it herself." That night, when Maria, the psychologist, asked Lucía if she was ready to tell her full story, the girl replied in a whisper, "No need to tell. They already know." The San Antonio Police Department, in coordination with the FBI, launched a full-scale investigation after analyzing Lucía's drawings and statement fragments. What began with scattered clues, an old logo, a silver ring, a sleeve marking, led them to uncover a circle of men connected to Rafael Salinas, not through family, but through a private moral development group operating under the name of a men's character-building club in New Braunfels. On paper, the group hosted seminars on fatherhood, family leadership, and loyalty. But when undercover FBI agents infiltrated the circle as new recruits, they discovered something different. Closed-door meetings, no phones, no recordings, and discipline exercises that included role-play scenarios centered around moral responsibility for younger females. A hidden camera recorded 17 minutes of a discussion between 3 men. They talked about a fixed rendezvous spot near the abandoned park, how to treat minor trauma to sensitive areas, and how to administer emergency contraception that leaves no trace in the blood work. Raphael's voice appeared twice, unclear but confirmed at a 93% match using AI voice analysis. The men involved all held respectable jobs. One was a school district electrician, one a hospital shuttle driver, and the man with the silver ring, an administrative assistant with security clearance at the county courthouse. None had previous charges. All were men who had been trusted. When the FBI issued a warrant, much of the warehouse material had been burned exactly 48 hours earlier. Surveillance camera hard drives around the park were ripped out, but inside the wall, tucked behind old electrical tubing, they found a USB drive, still intact. Inside, 39 video clips, files encrypted, timestamps stretched across 11 months. Police did not release their contents, but one investigator, walking out of the digital forensics unit, whispered, "We thought we were used to evil. Turns out, we weren't." In October, the case officially went to trial at the Bexar County Criminal Court. Rafael Salinas was charged with 17 counts, including statutory rape, unlawful restraint, and participating in a coordinated criminal conspiracy involving a minor. 3 additional men were arrested later and tried separately as co-conspirators. News outlets covered the trial daily. Television broadcasts showed the accused with blurred faces, but Lucía never appeared, not once. The girl, now 12, did not testify. She didn't write a letter. She sent no message. When asked why, her attorney answered before the press, "Lucía is not evidence, she is a person." Cameras weren't allowed to film the full courtroom. But, during one moment, when Rafael was confronted with evidence from the recovered USB drive, he dropped his head onto the table. His defense attorney requested a 20-minute recess due to his client's emotional instability. During that recess, someone placed a brown envelope on the prosecutor's information desk. Inside, a single drawing. No name, no signature. The sketch showed a young girl standing at the front of a house holding a key. Behind her, a yellow school bus. The door to the house was open, but she hadn't stepped in. Beneath the image, a handwritten line, "Not everyone who opens the door is someone you can trust, but you still have to learn how to walk inside." Rafael was sentenced to 128 years in prison. The others received sentences ranging from 17 to 35 years, with no chance of parole. Lucía wasn't present on the day of sentencing. She was living with a foster family in McAllen, back in school, learning hip-hop dance and journaling in Spanish to help fade the old memories. When Walter Jimenez was asked one final time about the case, he said, "I'm just the driver. But when a kid cries, every single day, you can't keep thinking it's just a bad morning." 1 year after the trial, Lucía Morales' name no longer appeared in the media. Articles stopped at "anonymous victim." No one searched for her drawings anymore. No one asked Walter Jimenez about that year. He had retired. The old school bus, number 214, was sold to a private Taino school. But every time someone stepped on board, seat 4 by the window remained untouched. Dark leather, slightly worn at the edges, never taken. In McAllen, Lucía lived with her grandmother and 2 other foster children. She still went to school, competed in dance, and wrote poetry. She still didn't talk much, but she smiled now. One day, during a small career day at her school, the teacher asked the students what they wanted to be when they grew up. The others said doctors, engineers, musicians. Lucía raised her hand last. She said, "I want to be someone who listens." The class chuckled. The teacher smiled. "What kind of job is that?" Lucía replied, "The kind that doesn't ask questions right away." No one knew whether she ever fully remembered what happened. No one knew if she still drew. But once, during a call between her grandmother and Walter, she said, "Lucía told me she's not afraid of her dreams anymore, because now she can turn the light on by herself." There is no ending strong enough to erase what happened. But sometimes the best thing a child can be given is a room where she's finally allowed to stay quiet.